What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Jiu Jitsu Junction podcast. My name is Andre, and I'm here with my buddy Michael. And the central topic today is how to teach Jiu Jitsu effectively if you're new to teaching Jiu Jitsu, and kind of discussing its effects on your own skill development, both as a teacher and somebody who does Jiu Jitsu.
So that's something that has been really interesting to me, is how teaching jiu-jitsu has kind of brought me off a plateau. You know, I think I came to a realization maybe 6 or 8 months ago that if jiu-jitsu is going to be a part of my life for as long as I'm able to do it, which I totally plan to happen, then at some point in time, that's going to include teaching. Right. At some level. And I think everybody who is going to have a lifelong jiu-jitsu journey, you're going to spend a season, may not be the whole season, may not be a long season, but you're going to have a season where you're teaching. And that season could be as quick as just maybe you're doing some privates because you're, really good at a few things and people want to learn to get better at a triangle and you're really good at triangles, or whatever it may be. But that's going to be a season at some point in time in your jiu-jitsu journey. And I guess about 6 months ago, I was sitting down with Jeff, the owner of our gym, and I told him, I said, hey, I feel like I'm at a plateau. I feel like at that point in time, there'd been a few months where I was not getting better and everybody else at the gym was. And I was like, I'm at a plateau. I think that maybe changing my perspective and teaching a class would be really helpful, and I feel like that would help progress my game. And I have other life experiences that are not jiu-jitsu that I had a similar experience in, where I wanted to get better at something and that I was decent at, and so I started teaching in some sort of capacity, and it made me better. And I figured, hey, maybe it'll do the same thing at jiu-jitsu, and I think it has. I think it's made me a better jiu-jitsu practitioner, long story short. Just to give you some background at what my jiu-jitsu level is, like, I'm okay at jiu-jitsu. Like I'm okay.
He's good at jiu-jitsu.
I mean, I started doing jiu-jitsu my martial arts experience started with kickboxing when I was in middle and high school. And then, when I was 21-ish, I made the transition to jiu-jitsu. I'm 30 now. And bounced around a couple different gyms before I ended up with Jeff in 2014-ish, 2015-ish, something like that. And, ended up with Jeff, got my blue belt in 2017. I was actually looking through some pictures today to try to figure out when that was. I'm still a blue belt, and I got it in 2017. I got married in 2018, the end of 2018. I told everybody at the gym when I got married that I'm taking a year off jiu-jitsu. And guys, if you're getting married and you're in jiu-jitsu, you should take a sabbatical when you get married and learn how to be a good husband, because since I did that, my wife saw me do that. She lets me do jiu-jitsu whenever I want to now. And she encourages me to do jiu-jitsu. But so I took a year off. A year turned into 2 years because of COVID. And then I got back in and started training. I've always been a 3 or 4 a week kind of guy. I'm not a 5, 6, 7 day a week kind of guy. It's just, I have a job, I have a family. I'm not going to do it more than 3 or 4 days a week. And so that's where my jiu-jitsu level is. And like I said, I asked Jeff about it, and he said, hey, well, we don't have a morning slot. If you want to teach a morning class 2 days a week, why don't you teach a morning class? And that's where I started.
Yeah, it's really cool. And there is definitely, like, as one of his regular training partners, the reason I brought him on is because he started beating me up.
I don't know if I go that far.
He started
catching him on occasion.
Yeah, but and like I showed up to one of the classes. It's kind of a terrible slot for me. It was a good class, and I think that your story about taking the sabbatical and like I think that's very relatable for a lot of people who are white belts, blue belts, because they'll start and they'll like obsessively do it because they're getting the skill acquisition. It feels good. You're chasing getting better at something. It's very novel. And then because jiu-jitsu is a very long time period, life kind of inserts itself, and then you have to take these breaks, and you're more likely to end up in these like plateaus, especially if you're a 3 or 4 a day, 3 or 4 days a week kind of person. And yeah, I think that it's a pretty cool thing that you went to teach in order to break the plateau.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't, I didn't know what I was expecting going into it, right? I didn't know if it was going to work. I had a lot of reservations about it, you know, because I'm a blue belt. I mean, I'm a blue belt, and I'm like, man, how's this going to look if a bunch of studs roll into my 7 a.m. Tuesday class, which happened. And I'm a blue belt, and I've got a guy who just won absolute division at a local Naga tournament and is a college wrestler and, you know, is a professional MMA fighter. Like, you know, like I had a lot of reservations, and that ended up being one of the things that made me better, because when you start, you know, when I went into that class, it was like, listen, it is the best kind of accountability, because, you know, you don't want everybody to see you getting mauled. And, you know, if Nick Rodriguez comes into my class, who he's there every Tuesday for the most part, you know, like 8 times out of 10, Nick's going to catch me. Mm-hmm. And if you're curious who Nick Rodriguez is, like, look him up. He's a great wrestler, professional MMA fighter. I mean, really, really, really good at jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And that was one of the first things that I was concerned about, was that first day that I had 5 or 6 guys come in and I saw Nick roll in. I was like, oh, these guys are about to watch me get beat up. And they did. And it wasn't a big deal. I mean, it at the end of the day, it nobody else cared about it. So, you know, if that's something that you have a reservation about, if you're a blue belt, a purple belt, whatever, and you want to run a class, listen, you're going to get caught, and you will be better for it. Like, you're going to get caught, and it's not a big deal, and you're going to be better for it. So, yeah.
Yeah. It's really cool, like, that it happened your first class. You had to immediately face the thing that you were thinking about.
Yeah. And you know, my jiu-jitsu style has always been a little, I don't want to say like lazy, but it's definitely, I have, my jiu-jitsu is a slow paced jiu-jitsu. And it's just, that's how my style, that's the style that I fell into. You know, being in a position where I'm rolling with some guys that are trying to get you, like really trying to get you, because when you're leading, when you're the one who's, you know, leading the class, for lack of a better term, you know, everybody's going to try to get you now. And it first and foremost, it made me pick up my tenacity. It made me absolutely pick up my tenacity. Whereas, hey, if I'm just going to lunchtime jiu-jitsu 3 or 4 times a week and maybe going to open mat, and I'm always around guys that are friends, that I'm friendly with, that, you know, we're just having a good time, like, maybe I'm not going to turn the dial up as quick as I would if, like, oh man, this blue belt's trying to maul me, this white belt's trying to maul me, this whoever, fill in the blank, is trying to maul me. Like, you've got to pick up your pace. And that's one thing it definitely did, was it made me change my pace at jiu-jitsu, because I needed to, like, because that lazy jiu-jitsu that a lot of us kind of fall into, and I think a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners fall into, myself included, is just that. It's kind of lazy.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people that hit intermediate level, which is kind of where I would classify us, when you hit intermediate level, you realize that you get pretty good at frames. You get pretty good at, like, a few moves that you can just kind of stay safe.
Yeah.
And then do your counter jiu-jitsu, your slow jiu-jitsu, right? And it's really good to have things shaken a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that definitely pushed me a lot and changed me a lot. And I'd say the second thing that really made me step up from my plateau is, you know, just like everything in life, there are perspectives, and you know, whatever you're doing, sometimes you need to take a step back and see it from a different perspective, maybe like see it from a third party. It would be a better way to put that. And, you know, when you're teaching jiu-jitsu, and let's say you're teaching, you know, a triangle or a Kimura sweep or whatever you're teaching, it forces you to see it from a different perspective. And when you're teaching it and saying it out loud and actually going through the steps and really taking your time of, no, how this is how I grab the wrist. I've got my thumb out instead of my thumb in, or whatever it may be. You learn, just as you're trying to teach that one little nuance, you're reiterating that nuance to yourself. And I've noticed a big change in that, where the little things that maybe, I won't say I was throwing out the window, but I certainly wasn't paying the attention to that they deserved, were and are starting to be much bigger in my jiu-jitsu. Like I'm really paying attention to the nuances.
So when you're teaching jiu-jitsu, how much do you rely on doing conceptual teaching versus step-by-step technical teaching?
Yeah, I think I do a lot of step-by-step stuff. I think there's a time. I mean, again, I'm not the end-all be-all for. I'm not the end-all be-all to like this is the way it should or shouldn't be done. Again, I'm very new to this, but for me, like I'm going to take 2 or 3 weeks and we're going to work on one thing or one series of things, right? And it's usually going to be like we'll do a guard pass to side control to a Darce choke or whatever we're doing, and we'll work into that over a couple weeks. And I think that the conceptual side of it is I really want to make sure as people are, and I try to tell people like, hey, try to catch this while we're rolling and play with it. Like play with it. It's not black or white. It's a shade of gray, and you're going to have to figure out that, maybe this grip doesn't do best for me. Maybe it's, maybe I'm better with a gable grip as opposed to X, Y, or Z. So I think there's room for both. But maybe when I get to a higher level, I could see myself working more on conceptual things, but I just don't think I have the authority, for lack of a better term, to guide.
I don't know, concept. Man. You could tell someone to put their chest on the person's back and center things. I was just curious. Do you think that doing the step-by-step breakdowns is more helpful for people that are white belts? Like, because you're teaching a mixed level class, right? But I think that there's a pretty decent contingent of people that are white belts, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that the people who are listening might be people that are considering potentially walking down the teaching jiu-jitsu path, because that's what we're going to label it as.
Yeah.
Like, right. So like why you should do it, how to do it effectively. Yeah. Like how do you teach a fundamental class? And the class that I went to, it felt like a really strong fundamental class.
Yeah, that's what I want to teach, because I don't feel like I'm equipped to teach much beyond that. Can I do things that aren't fundamental, and do I do things that are not fundamental on a regular basis? Absolutely. But I don't know that I'm equipped to go out there into those deep waters. Let me rephrase that. I don't think I'm equipped to take people out into those deep waters. What I would say when I did this, I sat down with Jeff, a week before my first class, and I said, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. What would you add to this, take away from this, or what do you think of this? And we went through it together. And so if you're at your jiu-jitsu gym and you're picking up a morning class or whatever you're doing, sit down with the owner, with the black belt, the professor, and say, this is what I'm thinking about doing. This is my curriculum, for lack of a better term, for the first few classes. What would you add or subtract to this? And I think the first class I did was a leg drag. The first couple weeks, it was fundamental leg drag. Let's find out where everybody is. Let me roll with everybody. Let's get some good fundamentals together, and let me kind of learn some people's learning styles, because some people need to see it, some people need to hear it, and some people need to do it. And let's figure out who we're working with, and then go from there. The first week or two, like I said, was a leg drag to side control to a back take, which is fundamental. And then from there, I think we probably went to like a triangle choke or a Darce, and that's it.
So like you mentioned the different ways that people learn. What kind of breakdown do you think that is? Like how many people need to see it a bunch? How many people need to hear it? Feel it, right? Like, because for me, if I don't understand the concept of what I'm doing, like that's why I keep being like conceptual or step by step. It's because for me, I have a lot of trouble understanding how to do moves effectively if I don't get like the concept of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, no, I don't know what the breakdown is. I mean, I'm sure it's not 30, 33, 33, 33, you know, but
I would put that in the thumbnail.
yeah. So, you know, I don't know. Personally, I tend to be the same way. Is if I'm being taught a technique, I need to if I had to put down the perfect scenario for me to learn something, it would be like Jeff comes in and says, "Hey, we're doing Kimura sweeps." And then I see him do a Kimura sweep a few times and I catch the gist of it. And then like we're partners together a lot at these classes. And you'll notice a lot of times when we're doing it, I sit down and I'll try to get you to do it to me first. And that's something that's really that helps me learn, is that if you do it to me, like I don't know why, but for some reason, if I feel the setup and everything from the opposite perspective, it reinforces it to me somehow. I don't know. Maybe I'm like stupid or something, but
you're not stupid.
But
not for that reason.
yeah. No, but that's the way I like to learn. And you know, I don't know how it breaks down though. I don't know how it breaks down. I think that, you know, if I had to. I think the higher level you get, or at least the higher level the higher the level the person is in the class that I teach, the more conceptual it is to them. And I'm okay with that. And I like that. And I would say the lower level is when you need to be like, no, we don't do this because X, Y, Z. Like, you know, you have to learn the rules before you break the rules, as a kind of thing. So
cool. So like if you were to tell somebody who's considering starting teaching their first class, do you have like a set of like these are what you should choose based on, you know, their skill? Do you think that it always needs to start with like, this is a fundamental guard retention, or this is a fundamental like the arm bar triangle omoplata, things like that, the basics? Do you think that you should be teaching something that you prefer, like first class? Just let's how do we get over our nerves, because it's nerve-wracking. That's part of the reason why like instead of starting teaching adults, I was like, you know what, I'll just help with the kids program.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like,
and that's a viable thing.
Yeah.
Like that is like it's not a zero-sum game.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that definitely, it doesn't have to be an adults class. I mean, it doesn't. You know, before I started teaching jiu-jitsu and got involved in jiu-jitsu when I was a high schooler who had kickboxed at a gym in Kings Mountain for a while. I mean, I was teaching kids and I learned a lot from that. So it's a viable thing. What I did was I sat down with a pen and paper, because I'm a pen and paper guy. I like to write. And I said, another thing that makes you get over your plateau is you look at yourself. And I looked at myself and said, what are my three best techniques? What are my three best techniques? And for me, it came down to a leg drag. Got a leg drag a lot. It was a leg drag, triangle choke, and a Darce choke.
Okay, I was gonna say, if you don't put Darce, I'm gonna throw something.
yeah, because those are my highest percentage techniques. Yeah. Those have been my highest percentage techniques for a long time. It's what I'm really comfortable with, and I know it. Like I can I know those three things. I can make a very valid argument that those might be the only three things in jiu-jitsu that I'm like good at. And so I took that and I said, I took those three techniques and I was like, which one can I most accurately convey and which one is the easiest of the three? And I came out with leg drag. So if your best technique is like an inside heel hook, you probably shouldn't teach that. Or an outside heel hook. You know, I love heel hooks. I mean, but you probably shouldn't start out with that, you know, because next thing you know, your first class that you're teaching, somebody just knee gets exploded, and then you know there's no recovering from that. So
you taught kids before? I did. So what do you think the difference is for you between teaching kids and teaching adult beginners?
I think kids learn easier. I think, and there's no ego. There's less ego. So those are the two things. And adults don't usually have their parents there, which is a plus.
Definitely
That's one of the reasons I stopped teaching kids. I mean, I taught kids. I mean, I got into martial arts when I was 5. You know, I got beat up at like a Wendy's ball ball pit when I was like 5. I don't even remember it, but I came home and my dad was like, "You're not getting beat up again," and he put me into a martial arts school in Kings Mountain called Ing School Self Defense, and it was just a dirty kickboxing school, man. And like when I said like dirty boxing with a few kicks, and then I wanted to play football when I was like 7 or 8, and my mom was like, "Nope, that's too dangerous. You should like kickbox." Like you should go to kickboxing tournaments, you know, which makes a lot of sense, right?
I think that kickboxing is probably safer than football, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but probably so. Who knows? But nonetheless, you know, I got into that. I got a black belt from them when I was in high school, and I taught them. And you know, up until a couple years ago, I was, you know, I was at this school for 10, 15 years. And so one of the owners became a very close mentor of mine, and he still is. And, you know, I would help him out when he needed help and stuff. And so I taught kids and I taught some adults there. But, yeah, one of the reasons I stopped teaching kids was because kids' parents were just getting
if they're allowed to sit and observe closely, it can get pretty tough because most of the time the parents will not have any context for what's actually happening.
Absolutely.
And it's very, very apparent in jiu-jitsu too.
Absolutely.
Because how much overlap from your life experience do you have as a normal person getting into jiu-jitsu? Have you ever been touched that way?
Yeah, no, exactly. It's very if you don't know it, it's weird. And it's the same thing for, you know, a lot of stuff. Like I remember I got to a point where I was having problems, like, you know, a kid gets body kicked, which, you know, happens. It happens. And I mean, it's standard, and the wind gets knocked out of him. And I'm like, hey, you know, you're 10 years older than me. You should know your kid's not dying. Like, he got the breath knocked out of him. Just give me a minute and please get off the mat with shoes on. Like, you know, so I would say that's probably the only downside to teaching kids, because you learn a lot teaching kids because they ask peculiar questions. And some of those really peculiar questions, like it may be 2 or 3 days later, it's like, you know what, maybe there's a point there. Maybe there is a point there, and it didn't have, and maybe, you know, he shouldn't have brought Tyrannosaurus Rex into it, but, you know, like maybe there is a point there, you know. Exactly.
You can't bar me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So no, I definitely think there is a lot of overlap there.
Yeah. I find that teaching kids has been super fun and valuable, but we also have a different environment at our gym where
very much so.
The kids are tougher. Generally speaking, the parents kind of let the coaches do what they're doing, and then if the kids are really young, they're nearby, but they're not like right there most of the time. Yeah, and it would be very different if they felt like they could walk onto the mats.
Oh, absolutely.
Like we even have like a cage around.
God, what I would have done for that 10 years ago when I was teaching kids regularly. But I mean, our Jeff Chase and Jeff Chase and Joe have done a really, really, really exceptional and phenomenal job of stewarding a really good atmosphere there. Like I think they've got the best of both worlds, you know, as far as like competitiveness, a really friendly atmosphere, and, you know, enough creativity with enough rules. And that's a hard osmosis to hit. And I think they've done it. I think they've done it.
Yeah. I've never been anywhere that mixes it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So would you say that it's easier for somebody to step onto the mats to teach kids first?
In jiu-jitsu, I would say adults.
I would say adults. You would say adults.
Just and just because, like, if you've got a 22-year-old and you say you need to move your left foot here, they know which one's their left foot and they know how to move it there. And that's why I would say, because I mean, just because a 6-year-old doesn't know how to move his body as well, or her body as well, and it just is the way it is, you know. So I would say I think it's easier to I think it's easier to teach adults.
Yeah, I find that because I've led a couple of adults classes. I've never taken a slot. But I think that it probably depends on your personality. Like if you're somebody who really adores kids, then maybe you could do that. But you also have to have different expectations for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? You have to say things like move your inside foot instead of left foot.
Yeah. And even then, you may still get them to look at you and be like, we're inside now. Like, we're inside now.
We're inside
so you don't know. I mean, it's kind of a wild card.
Yeah. I actually found that when I started teaching the kids, I started learning a lot more creative jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Like they're not like, oh, I can't do that. They're just like, I'm like, oh, Jesus, you could do that.
Yeah.
Like I learned a lot about taking backs from watching my gangly kid do it when he was 4 or 5 years old.
Oh, yeah.
And it was super fun.
And also the other thing you kind of have to worry about with kids is like, okay, so you teach them a Kimura from side control. Well, some kids, because they're kids and they have this crazy flexibility that they're going to lose in 10 years. Like they see one kid not tap to a Kimura because he can do whatever he wants to with his arm. And they're like, oh, it doesn't work, and then you got to deal with that. So, just because I think there's a lot more wild cards in jiu-jitsu than there are with everything, with other things. That's why I would say kids are maybe a little bit more difficult, a little more challenging.
I kind of like the idea when you're teaching kids to gamify everything. Mm-hmm. We had this like small class where it was just me and Carrie on the mats with like 3 or 4 kids. Mm-hmm. And we got the best wrestling and jiu-jitsu we've ever seen out of these kids by like being like, okay, you guys, you must touch each other's feet.
Yeah.
And then
touches.
And it was just, I was like, how come these kids now look like they're like real wrestlers? What's going on?
Believe it or not, you can do the same thing with adults.
Yeah,
you can do the same. Now, when I was teaching this kickboxing gym, a few years ago, while I was kind of starting to phase out more, I was doing way more jiu-jitsu than I was kickboxing, and for a lot of different reasons. But I started trying to teach them some jiu-jitsu and teach them some wrestling and stuff. And I tried to teach them some wrestling stuff, and I was looking at them, and I was like, this is terrible. It's like, and if any of y'all are watching, like I love you guys, but I was like, this is absolutely terrible. And then I remember toe touches or foot touches, whatever you want to call them. And I was like, here's the new thing. You're going to try to touch your partner's foot. And after a couple sessions of that, I was like, man, these guys actually look like they wrestled for a year in high school, maybe, or middle school or something like that. Like you can totally gamify it.
Dumb
it went from a bunch of guys like trying to wrestle standing up like they're kickboxing to a group of people that were actually, in somewhat of a wrestling position and moving somewhat like they're grappling, or going to grapple. So.
Yeah. So let's bring it back to the how to handle some of the odd situations that might come up when you're first starting leading a class. What do you do when you're just out of your depth? You don't know the answer to what you're being asked. That's
a great question. Don't fake it. That's the first thing you do, because as soon as you start trying to be like, well, I know this and that, and it's XYZ, and you don't, people can sense that. Whether they know you're right or wrong, they can sense that. And, I'll give you a case in point. One of the probably second or third week, I'm doing a sweep from De La Hiva, which is one of my favorite sweeps from, if somebody's standing up and you're on your back. And somebody asked me, when you sweep the back foot, do you hook the ankle or do you hook the knee? Right. So you've got them here, you've got, you're grabbing this hand, you're sweeping the far foot. And I was like, I told him, I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't really know. I said, I think either one could work. I said, I would tend to think that you're better off sweeping the knee. And if I'm doing it, I'm hooking that knee. Like I'm hooking the knee and pulling it forward. And I said, but I tell you what, you'll be here Thursday. I can find out between now and then. Now, I will say I was right. I talked to Jeff, and Jeff said, no, a lot of people teach it sweeping the foot, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you've got an athletic person, they're just going to jump over your leg. you know. So you know, I told him, I said, hey, talk to Jeff. He said, go for the knee.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of people, somebody's going to have a lot of respect for you for, one, showing some humility, and two, for, you know, seeking the answers. Now, the other thing I'll say is, if you say you're going to have an answer for them Thursday, you got to have an answer for them Thursday. Whether they remember it or not, you have to do it. And so that's what I'd say. Just stay humble, don't lie, and seek out the answer. And I think you'd be surprised how much respect someone would have for you for that.
Yeah, people really respect authenticity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, and being, you could say, this is what I prefer, and I'll look into it. I think this, but I don't have a 100% answer. Yeah. And I really appreciate it when people do that. Like, sometimes it's a purple belt, a brown belt, sometimes a black belt. I remember there were a couple of black belts that did that kind of thing. When I was training in Massachusetts, They'd just be like, I don't have the answer to that. And I was like, bravo.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
You're supposed to have all the answers according to this mystical belt system. Mm-hmm. And being the right kind of person to just slow it down, give it a little bit of thought, and come up with the answer that you don't know, and finding them the answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be said about all aspects of life, though. I think. That's an aspect I think that you should have in your entire life. You know, don't lie. I mean, it's just an extension of being a good person.
Yeah, it's a form of integrity.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Don't whip out my thesaurus over here.
Your thesaurus. Well, next time I'll just have a thesaurus here, and I'll prop it open, and we'll just flip through it. There's going to be a lot of silent space with like page turning. I think that we pretty much well covered most of this. Do you have any like closing thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just go back to what I said at the beginning is if jiu-jitsu is going to be, from my perspective, if jiu-jitsu is going to be a lifelong journey, and for me it is. If it's not for you, that's completely okay, but for me it is. And then there's going to be a point in time in this journey where you're teaching, and you're probably going to be equipped to teach the fundamentals and stuff and 2 or 3 things that you know really well before you're comfortable. And so step out on it, talk to your, you know, coach, black belt, professor, whatever you want to call him, talk to him about it and see if it's a good fit, and take and run with it. Worst case scenario is, you know, you teach for a few weeks and you're like, hey, this isn't me. The second thing I did with Jeff that I didn't say is that, you know, I sat down with Jeff ahead of time and I said, hey, just so we're clear, I want to lay out some expectations from you and from me. This is what I expect to do. What do you expect me to do? Let's make sure our expectations are on par with one another, and let's put a time limit to it. And for me, it was, I think it was 6 weeks or 2 months. I said, I want to do this for at least 2 months, and then let's decide if we're going to keep doing it or not. And, you know, after the 2 months was up, we were like, this is going great. I'm really enjoying it. You know, I think the people here are really enjoying it. And we kept on doing it. So just, you know, go out and try it. I mean, I just don't see many bad aspects of it. I don't see many downsides.
Yeah. And like, if you're somebody who's like anxious about it, God, it's going to really help you grow.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like there's a bunch of other considerations beyond becoming better at jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. Like facing, it's almost like public speaking, but also with your body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So you have a lot of opportunity for growth, both on and off the mats, by doing something like this, and it's gonna up level you.
Yeah,
as a person and on the mats.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you for joining me on the podcast, and we will see you guys next time.